Hey everyone, it's Kong, and in this video I'm going to look at the Macho Lotto, or Big Bros Gamble as it's sometimes called. One of the really common questions that I often see is whether it's worth it to gamble on this, because there's kind of a variety of prizes, and I'm actually also kind of curious just how worth it is. So I decided to do the math. Obviously it's worth saying that whether it's worth sinking your crystals into this little gambling game entirely depends on what you want to get out of it. If you're the kind of player who really wants the exclusive skin, then you're probably already prepared to go all in and spend the 4,000 crystals regardless. So it's kind of a moot point for you. If you're already prepared to spend the crystals knowing that you're probably going to have to get all 10 prizes, then it's not really gambling at that point. It's essentially purchasing a bunch of materials for crystals. So that's fine. But if you're not all in for the skin, the question is, how far is it worth going? So that's what I wanted to find out. First, let's take a look at the prizes. Now, I want to remind you that I'm not talking specifically about this current March 2020 Illustrial Macho Lotto. This kind of goes for all of them. I'm going to try to use some general principles to show whether it's worth spending however many crystals it ends up being for the prizes that are on offer. The prizes are generally pretty consistent from lotto to lotto, with a few changes here and there, so hopefully this video will be useful for future Macho Lottos as well. So in descending order of importance, we have the exclusive limited skin. For this March Lotto, it's Illustrial. Then in the gold tier, we have a runestone and an SSR accessory. The silver prizes are 40 skin vouchers, 100 orichalcum ore, and 3 Trinity vouchers. And then the bronze prizes, or the sucker prizes, are 10 SR Crafter's Hammers, 300,000 gold, 5 friendship vouchers, and a random SR accessory. So just to go over the costs of each gamble, you can see they increase in cost per spin that you do. The game of the Macho Lotto changes almost every time, so this one we have a little spinning mechanic. Some of them are drawing a card, and so on. But the general format and cost is pretty consistent. So your first gamble will be free, cost 0 crystals, and then it scales up from there. 50, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 800, and then your final gamble is 1,000 crystals. This means the total cost for all prizes is 3,950 crystals, which works out to 45 Trinity vouchers, so almost half of an entire pity rate. The average cost per gamble, or per spin, is 395 crystals, or 4.5 Trinity vouchers. So essentially each pick, on average, is worth about half of a 10 pull, or half of a multi-pull in the summoning gacha. Now, to get started with determining whether each gamble or each spin is worth the average price of 395 crystals, we want to get an approximate baseline value in crystals for each prize. This process might seem a little bit contrived right now, but bear with me, and I'll show you how this all pans out in the end. So the easiest prize to get a baseline value for is the 3 Trinity vouchers, because we can buy Trinity vouchers straight up for crystals. So 3 Trinity vouchers is worth 264 crystals. Similarly, 50,000 gold costs 30 crystals. This is using the kind of the worst exchange rate, partly because I consider the higher bundles, you get a bit more gold as a discount for buying in bulk. But for our purposes, we're going to be a little more fair and use the worst exchange rate. 300,000 gold using this exchange rate would be 180 crystals. Next, we can work out the friendship vouchers. We know that 1 Trinity voucher costs 600 friendship points. We can consider that to be kind of a discount because you're only allowed a couple per month, but still, if we take that as an arbitrary basic indicator of value, that means that 600 friendship points are worth 88 crystals. And that means 1,000 friendship points, which is the cost of 10 vouchers, is worth generously 147 crystals. So the 5 offered in this particular lotto are worth 74 crystals. And using the same exchange rate for these friendship points, it's fairly easy to see that 10 SR Crafter's Hammers are also worth 74 crystals. So now we're getting into the stuff that's a little bit harder to quantify, but we can do some kind of mathematical gymnastics to come up with basic baseline values. So let's look at the skin vouchers. I'm using the basic skin voucher gift pack as a baseline for the price of the skin vouchers. There are probably better deals out there, but those are kind of mitigated by the limited number of times that you're allowed to buy them per month, or per week, or whatever. So if we remove the modest number of crystals and gold from this pack, it works out to $17.33 in US dollars for the 128 skin vouchers. This comes to $5.42 for 40, which equals 163 crystals as at their base store cost. So if we're using the base store cost of crystals to US dollars, that's what it works out to. $5.42, 163 crystals. The 100 orichalcum ore that you get is tricky because there's nothing equivalent in the store. So from guild battles, you're able to get 100 orichalcum ore and 50 crystals. Now I know the ore comes from harder battles, but it still is a rough equivalency. So from each wave of a purgatory level guild battle, you get 100 ore and 50 crystals, so I'm going to roughly count those as being worth the same. So the 100 ore, I'm going to say, worth 50 crystals. Now in the honor store, we can see that one Trinity voucher is worth 150 honor points. So again, as with the Trinity voucher from the friendship store, we can consider this to be a discounted price because you're only allowed one per week. But it does give us the opportunity to kind of establish at least a baseline discount price in crystals for the SR accessory. The SR accessory is also limited, so this might be roughly equivalent anyway. It costs 200 honor points, which means that a random SR accessory is worth at least 118 crystals. If we use the same calculations, the even more limited SSR accessory gift box would be worth 588 crystals, at least. Finally, if we're using the same calculations, the runestone would be worth 294 crystals at least. Now, we all know that runestones are actually very rare and very valuable, so that is a little bit of a skewed number. But if you're getting deep enough into the Macho Lotto that you're pulling the runestone not just by fluke, then you're kind of in it for the full value of the gamble anyway, so it does kind of balance itself out a little bit. And obviously the final prize is the limited skin itself. It doesn't have a very good derived value because it's extremely limited in nature. The only way to really determine its worth is how badly you want it. So the people who are gunning to the end of the lotto specifically for the skin are doing it knowing the cost. So for the purposes of my calculations here, I'm going to give it a presumptive value of 1,000 crystals. So with all those values established, you can see them here in a kind of neat little table just to recap. Here's a list of all the prizes, and here's a list of the values that we kind of established or derived from other equivalencies in the various stores. So with these values established, the next thing for us to do is figure out the rates of actually winning these prizes on each roll. So the official rates for the gamble were actually posted in Japan, and this is the screen grab. I can't actually read this, but it has been cleaned up on Reddit. Here's a cleaned up version that I put together just in Google Sheets to help me do these calculations. It basically shows that the lower tier prizes are heavily weighted in the earlier gambles. So when you're doing your first or your second or your third gamble, you're very, very likely to get one of those bronze prizes. You can luck out and get a higher tier prize, but it's a much lower percent. Everyone kind of figured that that was the case, just based on anecdotal experience anyway. And of course, as you get into later gambles, the chances of winning the bigger prizes gradually increases. Okay, now for the meat of this video. We can use these rates and the derived values of the various prizes to calculate a rough value per gamble. So that means when we actually compare the cost of the gamble the 0, 50, 100, 200, to this kind of calculated value, it helps us determine how worth it is. So here's a table that I put together showing each pull with the percentage rates, the actual cost of the gamble, and then the derived value based on your percent chance of pulling whatever prize on that particular turn number. So on your first gamble, based on the fact that you have a 20% chance to pull all of these bronze things, 5% chance to pull the silver things, the average value of your first pull is 94 crystals. Of course, the first pull is free, so it's obviously always worth doing for everyone, no matter what you get. So your second gamble costs 50 crystals and will net you something worth on average 95 crystals. Your third pull costs 100 crystals and will net you something just over that value, 117. And this is where we cross the threshold of getting more return on your value and starting to get less return on your value. So the fourth gamble costs 200, but you're only going to get about 135 crystals worth of value out of your prize. Similarly, on the next pull, it costs 300, but you're getting about 168 crystals worth of value out of your prize. And then so on up the chart. You can see we have 400 crystals for 226 in return, 500 crystals for 277, 600 for 366 in value, 800 for 486, and then 1,000 for 730 in value. Now the numbers mean a little bit less on the end of that chart because, like I said earlier, if you're in this deep in the lotto, you're gunning for the skin anyway, or you're gunning for the runestone anyway, so it's not really a consideration or it's not really a concern of spending those crystals for that amount of investment. You want the skin, you're going to spend the 1,000. You want to spend the 1,000, that's what you're here for. For everyone else who's interested in knowing kind of when to stop or not getting sucked in, I think this is really helpful and really interesting. So if you literally only care about getting more than your money's worth, you would stop at the third gamble. You do your first free one, and then the next two, you're basically getting more, you're recouping more than your crystal expense. I highlighted the fourth and the fifth ones because they're kind of interesting cases. If you take a close look at the rates at the top of the chart here, the character skin only really comes into play on your fourth gamble. Similarly, the runestone and the SSR accessory really only come into play on the third. So if you want to give yourself an outside, ridiculous low percent chance of getting one of those top tier rewards with one of these cheaper gambles, you kind of have to pull that fourth gamble as well. Cost 200. Part of the reason for that 135 value is the really low chance of getting one of the good prizes. But another thing to take into account is that we did kind of lowball some of the values of these crystals based on, limited Trinity purchases in the various stores. So you could argue that the true value of these crystal prizes is higher, closer to that 200, and you're basically getting even value on your fourth summon, or your fourth gamble as well. And finally, I have the fifth gamble highlighted as well, because it's at that point that the cumulative value of your gambles still costs less than a 10 pull in the gacha. So if you add that up, it costs 650 crystals. Your next gamble would bring you up over 1,000 crystals, so it's costing you more than a 10 pull. But if you're just doing up to the fifth one, it's less than what one multi-pull would cost you. So that might be a kind of natural psychological cutting off point for certain players as well. If you want to come in and gamble, but you don't want it to cost you more than a whole bunch of chances at characters, then you could stop at the fifth. You have that tiny percent chance of getting one of those really coveted prizes, but it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg like some of the later summons. So hopefully all that math made sense. I know it's kind of a lot of weird calculations based on things, but the basic theory behind it is for people who want to come into the Macho Lotto and really want a runestone or really want the limited character skin, you kind of just have to suck it up and expect that you're going to be spending almost 4,000 crystals. And if you want the skin, then it's worth it. For a lot of people who are kind of scrimping and saving their crystals, they're on limited resources, maybe they're new players, maybe they're free to play, maybe they're saving up for their favorite character, these prizes look really enticing and you want to feel like you have a chance. Hopefully this breakdown will help you realize when you can kind of dip in some crystals and when to put on the brakes. So yeah, again, hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully it helps you realize the real cost of this little mini game in crystals. At an average cost of $395 with the kinds of prizes that you're getting on average, it is expensive. It's not necessarily worth it unless you know what you're in for and you really want to spend those crystals on the last prizes. For most people, the free summon and maybe the 2 after that are about as far as you should go. So if you're gambling, happy gambling, good luck. I hope you get your skin. I hope you get your runestone. I hope you get your accessory. If you're watching this to try to convince yourself not to gamble, hold strong. Think of all the characters that you can get for those crystals. Thanks for watching, and happy Langrissing.